Hello my friends, Simon Miller here and welcome to an episode of Wrestling Timelines, and today we are going to go through the NWO, the New World Order, or the New World Organization as Hulk Hogan called it by accident at first. It is quite the conversation though, because if you want to call them the most influential group in wrestling history, well, you probably could, and I think you can. I mean, the WWE Attitude Era may not have happened without Eric Bischoff taking inspiration from Japan, and he was the dude to go full in with the idea of a cool heel and the anti-hero babyface. I mean, it was the idea that Steve Austin let in too hard, and that guy totally changed the game. What's really striking is doing a comparison when the NWO were formed in the summer of 1996 too now, because yes, I understand that comparison is the thief of joy, but look over on WWF TV. Vince McMahon, when this happened, introduced T.L. Hopper, who was a wrestling plumber. He would actually debut against Duke the Dumpster Droese, who's been in the news recently for terrible reasons, but at the end of the day, it was still a garbage man, which is why lots of fans flock to World Championship Wrestling. You could even argue this was part of the catalyst for AEW because, of course, the Elite Bullet Club Shangri-La Bang were all about the NWO. I mean, they wore their fandom on their sleeve, and they walked around doing the whole too sweet thing. That was the whole point. They grew up on all of this, so why not showcase it in the modern day? So they weren't just fans being fans, and fans loved it, so go fans, and the NWO changed it all. And here's how. We started in WCW on July 1994 because, yep, Hulk Hogan joined the promotion after he had a big old parade and actually proved Vince McMahon wrong instantly. The chairman of the WWF board didn't think that Hogan versus Ric Flair was worth a damn in the mid-1990s. And he was wrong, because Hulk went straight after the Nature Boy at the Bash of the Beach pay-per-view, and it was a huge success. People wanted to see it. Flair, of course, did the honors, because he always did the honors, but he understood what this was. Hulk was going to bring his unique brand of sports entertainment to WCW, and it worked. I mean, just look at the Slamboree buy rate that he doubled. It went from 105,000 buys to 225. Now, of course, hardened WCW supporters were a little bit worried what was going on here, because they didn't want the approach to suit Hulk Hogan, but when the statistics are telling you this, well, of course, the higher brass were going to do it, which is why soon we're also doing Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage versus Ric Flair and Arn Anderson. This was on Nitro 2 during one of our main events. The issue being WCW was in Four Horsemen country. Now that was South Carolina, and this was instantly proved by the fan who was in the front row, who ripped up some Hulk Hogan merchandise when he noticed the camera that was looking at him. He also did the Four Horsemen hand sign, and they weren't messing around, because the consistent chat was Hulk Hogan may be bringing in new viewers, but he is never going to be our guy, because he's hokey and he's cartoonish, and he was doing his usual WWF routine. Now you could argue that this was enough to justify a heel turn right back then, but WCW was not going to do this in 1994 because, again, Hulk Hogan was a draw. And also, what did the real-life Terry Bollea do before he signed the deal? He got creative control in his contract. This doesn't explain why Hogan decided it would be a good idea to have that Doomsday cage match, which was essentially an alliance of people trying to end Hulkamania. That's not me being fancy with my words either. That is what Ric Flair and 7 of his friends decided to call this. Now look, it was a huge triple-decker cage, so you would assume that some of this would be okay, but no it wasn't, and it regularly pops up on the worst matches of all time lists. It also featured Randy Savage as Hulk's partner as they faced Arn Anderson, the Barbarian, Meng, and the Dungeon of Doom. For no reason, we also threw Tiny Lister in there, who was Zeus in the movie No Holds Barred. But the real insult, if I can use that word, is actor Jeep Swenson, who was also featured. Because his character at the time was named The Final Solution. As a Jewish man, I can tell you, this is and was unbelievable, and of course WCW knew this too. He soon changed it to The Ultimate Solution, but excuse my language, fuck that guy. The Nature Boy gets beaten again after essentially being hit with a frying pan. Once again, you can do with that information what you will, and the whole thing is so ridiculous that Brian Pillman, who was meant to be in it, all of a sudden said, oh, I can't, I have to go get surgery. He knew. Now the major problem is the total lack of self-awareness, because Hulk Hogan thinks this is good stuff, but look into my eyes, it's not. In fact, the problem is he becomes too much of a parody, to the point we now really can't call him a babyface, because other than his name, well, the fans couldn't stand it. Eric Bischoff is making sure he is keeping an ear open to what is happening in the wrestling world. He sees the audiences are really into New Japan Super J Cup, so he makes a call. WCW is going to have a cruiserweight division. Now, not only will that continue to separate WCW from the WWF, but it was working great on ECW, so essentially Eric goes and signs a bunch of their talent. Now listen, that's been happening since wrestling was born. It is New Japan that inspires him over and over too, as Eric does indeed see the Battle Formation event, where Shinya Hashimoto takes the IWGP title back from the UFWI interloper Nobuhiko Takada. Due to their warring factions, the atmosphere is absolutely nuclear, and if you don't know, it was indeed promotional warfare between the two companies, and while it didn't last very long, I tell you, when they hit it right, it was awesome. Because of course it all ties into tribalism, which is happening right now. I mean, imagine WWE and AEW did it, despite it being impossible. The fans would pick their side, and they would support it till the end. All of this forms inside Bischoff's head, which ties into the May 1996 Nitro. It's one of the most famous days in wrestling history because Scott Hall debuts, even though it wasn't actually treated as a debut. He just turned up. Or at least that's how he was told to play it, because there were no videos, there was no surprise entrance, no marketing. Hall quite literally jumped the barricade and grabbed a microphone, and nearly everybody else who had jumped ship got repackaged in some way. But this was basically Razor Ramon, and he was just wearing a jean jacket and calling himself by his real name. I mean, he even says, "You know who I am, but you don't know why I'm here." WCW knows what they're doing too, because commentary barely refuses to reference it, and Scott is talking like he is still employed by the WWE, and obviously hardcore fans went nuts to it, especially when he mentioned Billionaire Ted and the Macho Man. If you don't know what that is, it ties into a very old niche that WWF did to take shots at WCW, and nobody on the WCW roster was going to talk about it, and he did. So this really was essentially World Championship Wrestling deciding to go head-to-head with their competition. And how does Hall end his promo? You want to go to war? You're gonna get one. So right, look, I get it. To those who weren't around, that doesn't sound all that groundbreaking, but it was just so different at the time, and it sparked a new foe too, the WWF legal team. So on the 3rd of June 1996, Vince McMahon marches out onto Raw and makes it clear there is no interpromotional warfare. He even says that Scott Hall has performed a ruse with all of the audience, and therefore the WWF legal team has sent a cease and desist to WCW, because what Scott Hall has done is essentially play the role of Razor Ramon on somebody else's television, and you can't do that due to copyright. The lawyers even tell Hall that future royalties will be withheld if he doesn't stop this, and it's a very legit situation. However, it helped with the story, because now the audience was totally obsessed. WCW must have felt the same a week later, because on the 10th of June, Flub Me Sideways Kevin Nash debuts too. This is perfect. Now this actually starts with Bischoff on commentary, who was yelling at Scott Hall saying, "Oh man, where's this big surprise you keep mentioning?" When instantly Nash turns up and he gets right in Eric's face. He also grabs a microphone and makes a language faux pas where talking about where the big boys play. But don't worry about that. It was another seismic moment. I mean, this was Diesel. He goes after the so-called fossils in the ring too, because as far as he sees it, WCW is full of washed up relics. Saying that, he could have mentioned anything and anybody would have got nuts because we couldn't believe it. It really then goes bonkers at the Great American Bash, because Bischoff outwardly asked these two, "Who the hell is your third man? Or at least, who are you working for?" Now they make it very clear that it's nothing to do with the WWF, and yes, they did this for legal reasons, but once again, the crowd doesn't care about that. The fact that this is all being talked about on pay-per-view, well, it was like Christmas come early. Now, yes, Scott Hall didn't seem to get the memo, because he keeps talking about the huckster, and even drops his Razor catchphrases like they're going out of fashion. Let's face it too, he also has the accent. Now, of course, it is an irony in the sense that Scott Hall was just doing his variation of Tony Montana from Scarface. But once again, these are the nuances of the situation, and by this point, everybody wanted to know who was going to be next, and who is that third man. It all tied into the Bash of the Beach 1996 because three heroes had challenged them for the sake of the company. So when Eric Bischoff was said, "Listen, you're going to have to wait till Nitro until I tell you who these baby faces are," the outsiders, as they were to be known, powerbombed Eric Bischoff through the stage. Now look, this isn't 2025, it's 1996. The fans lost their mind. This kind of stuff just didn't happen. Now this is why the NWO were ahead of the time, because yes, let's just say it as simply as possible, nobody else was doing this. WCW was about to zoom to the top of the wrestling tree and get properly established. Now sure, we weren't necessarily meant to like Hall and Nash, but they were just so cool. Let's just do a quick tangent to the 1st of July 1996. Because it was reported by the Wrestling Observer that the third guy would be a former WWF headliner, and yes, Mabel was mentioned. However, a week later, Dave Meltzer updates his story to say, "Wait a minute, I am pretty sure it's going to be Hulk Hogan." I mean, he even rightfully states that came from a movie set where Hulk and Ronny Piper were hanging out. It just feels necessary to underline both of these moments due to the constant chatter of the internet. Bash at the Beach then does happen on the 7th of July, where Hall and Nash do indeed face Sting, Randy Savage, and Lex Luger, although Luger gets injured instantly. Now, this was done for a couple of reasons. One, it sort of tricked the fans that went, is Lex Luger gonna come out and be the third man? Because he used to work for the WWF, but of course the other reason is now it's a basic tag team match. Therefore, as soon as the heels do start to cheat towards the end of the fight, Hulk Hogan marched to the ring, and thank goodness for that, he's our hero. However, Bobby Heenan, he knew the deal as he questioned, well, which side is he on? And man, do the other commentators get mad at him, because Hulk Hogan would never be the bad guy. Of course, they should have listened, because before long, the Hulkster drops the leg onto his longtime friend and rival, Randy Savage, and man, I'm gonna say it again, the wrestling world changed forever. Now, do not forget that Hogan hadn't even hinted about this, and his whole persona from day one had been the goody-goody two-shoes. I mean, the WWF steroid scandal knocked him, but look, he's right here, he kept going. Hulk goes so far as to cover the Macho Man for the 1, 2, 3, even though the match has been thrown out, and instantly we were like, what an asshole. It's sort of like today as we've learned about the real life Terry Bollea and him not being a good dude, because yeah, in seconds, we all felt like Hulk Hogan had been lying to our face year after year. And then, the promo after this, well, it's night and day. I mean, the gruff voice, the disdain, getting the name of the group wrong. Mean Gene Okerlund is fantastic too, because he is utterly horrified by all of this. And in the background, Hall and Nash are actually doing classic 80s Hulk Hogan poses. I mean, it was just next level trolling. Hulk even says that he's bored, as if to make out it's all been an act, and within seconds, Hollywood Hogan is born, and the fans pelt the ring with garbage. Now, you wouldn't want to see this today, but back then, there's a thing of beauty. I mean, Eric Bischoff must have been doing backflips wherever he was, because whether he knew it or not, Hulk had just opened the door for the classic heel, it's not my fault, you fans turned on me promo, so now I'm going to blame you. None of this is hyperbole either, it is just true. It was on the 29th of July 1996 when the now NWO debuted their iconic theme. I mean, go listen to it right now. It still has an edge to it, and this was 25 years ago. It hasn't aged a day. Now, it is weird in the sense a man says new world order over again, but if it works, it works. You can see the whole thing is aimed at a young adult male audience too, and at the time, that was the biggest demo by far. It was not, however, just the presentation that was winning people over. The group itself was just killers. Because on the 29th of July Nitro, WCW dares to venture out of the arena, which nobody was really doing, and it was all because the NWO were running amok. Because Jimmy Hart legs it to the ring and says, "Camera people, you've got to go backstage." And yep, there they were. The New World Order had actually taken over that area, with Kevin Nash lawn darting Rey Mysterio into a truck, and it's the most brutal thing you've ever seen. Some people actually thought Rey was dead too, because he literally thumps on the side of this thing, and the noise he makes when he hits the ground, I mean, I tell you, it was a super silly idea. The risk of injury was huge. According to Nash, a few years later as well, Mysterio wanted to be thrown through a tiny window you can just see in the corner. That would have been proper nuts. So all of this is just smashing you in the face over and over again, especially when we get to the fourth man, because good grief, this just ticked all the boxes. Because the best wrestling stories are always those where you can fill some plot holes, or at least make some sort of sense. So some people started to go, how are the NWO doing all of this? Well, simple, Ted DiBiase joined in and admitted he was the benefactor of the stable, the money man. That's where it's coming from. Who else? The Giant also killed Jim Duggan during this reveal, as he had signed up for the cash too, and it was just so smart. I mean, WCW had made it clear they weren't paying Hall and Nash. Well, now we know. I mean, the angle is so damn hot, and most fans hadn't even gotten to this point yet, but the fact that we were ahead of them, the sheer chaos it was offering, well, it just worked even better. I mean, if you can come up with something where your audience hasn't even pondered the facts, and you have then answered them, well, you're likely onto something. On the August 26th Nitro, the NWO have now totally embraced the black and white, and they start going after WCW representatives. I mean, it gets to the point that they would strip them and spray the logo on their fallen enemies' backs. I mean, Sting gets killed during one of these, and Ric Flair and Arn Anderson. Those two guys were meant to make the save. They were there to inspire hope. No. Of course, soon the question comes up, well, who are the good guys here? Because it kind of felt like the NWO had also taken that spot. I mean, Hogan uses that spray paint to dye Ric Flair's hair black, but go watch the reaction Some people think it's pretty badass. What really has to be hammered home here then is that before all of this, there was a feeling that wrestling in some respects was basically stuck in the 1980s. I mean, babyfaces smiled and they slapped hands. They said, oh my gosh, I want to be so good for your family. And you know what, damn it, I lost, but next time I'll get them. They were super colourful too with their gear, and as Scott Hall described it, they wore happy guy tights. That guy always got it. Bischoff would also talk about this too and how it was just a game of opposites. If WWE or the WWF is doing this, well, I'll go and do that. He wanted that underground vibe. He got it. Hogan buys in too with that ridiculous big yellow mustache and now black stubble, which is strange, but I'm just going to use the same term. It works. He looks different. He acts different. This is not the same individual. It all extends to these commercials that are paid for by the New World Order. And once again, these were produced in black and white. I mean, it is hilarious as Hogan is still being way too over the top and cutting old school promos. And as we learned over the years, the outsiders were trying to calm him down, but that's just what he knew. Tony Schiavone was a massive part of these too, because he was always act like he didn't know where they were coming. They went on his formatting sheet, so where the flub were meant to throw to now, they've ruined it. So the sense of disorder is just wonderful, and even the WCW crew are asking, well, who in the production truck is running these things? It all leads to the 16th of September Nitro, where Sting is still surfing, or he's Surfer Sting. Now, the week prior, the NWO had introduced their version of Sting, trying to convince people this was legit. Then at Full Brawl, the real guy had come to help WCW, so this was yet more nonsense. It did affect Sting though, because as we saw on this Monday night, in a very symbolic gesture, Sting cuts a promo with his back to the hard camera to indicate he is done with all of this silliness. Now, it's important to note that before this, he was in a tag team with Lex Luger, where Sting had been playing the good guy and Lex Luger had been a right nightmare because he was being an asshole. But given that Sting gave him the benefit of the doubt, he was offended when Lex questioned him. He was like, I would never join the NWO. Why do you insult me? Sting even said he had his life rules, which were stand by me and I'll stand by you. And given that his best bud had now done this, he doesn't work for the NWO, he doesn't work for WCW. He is a free agent. You know what? Maybe you won't see me for a while, but I'll always show up when you least expect it. Now, at the time, everybody was like, what the flub does that mean? But he wasn't going to wrestle again until December. But that wasn't the major story here, because Sting was about to become the man. It was October 21st when we finally learnt what this did all mean, because Sting decides to attack his evil doppelganger once more. But dude, this was not the same guy. And not only did he descend from the rafters, but the 90s dude was gone, and he is now in black and white too. Plus, he's painted his face completely differently, and some of the audience actually freaked out because, oh my gosh, this is quite similar to the NWO. And also, he looks like the dude from The Crow. But exactly, it is such a cool visual because while he does don these colors, he makes sure that he whoops the NWO's ass. The whole idea is presented as if he is the vigilante of wrestling. It is really one of the best character shifts ever. It also, of course, married up to what Hulk Hogan was doing, because he had the black trench coat too. He went and pulled that off. Not everybody could have done it. By the 20th of October 1996, he is just hanging out the rafters all of the time, and man, did that spark things off. It was always sold as if nobody knew what Sting was going to be doing, but it became an iconic part of Nitro. When were we going to cut to him? You then tried to figure out why he was there, or why was he watching this specific match. And listen, I mean it. On this night, he was watching Steven Regal versus Juventud Guerrera. We then jump forward to the 18th of November when, for whatever reason, WCW tried to make a change. Ted DiBiase was sort of moved aside, with the big twist being, the real person behind the NWO is Eric Bischoff. And look, I suppose outside of money reasons, this did tick a lot of boxes, because how is the New World Order getting on TV all the time? Well, it was Bischoff, he's pulling the strings. Ronny Piper had figured this out before as well, so he did tie it into a narrative. Eric Bischoff is the problem, and look, Eric proved to be great in this role, and it was yet another twist in a forever moving story. Now, even at this time, some cynical fans felt differently, as summed up in the Wrestling Observer, because it was deconstructed as Bischoff basically just wanting to be on TV, mostly because Vince McMahon was now on TV too. So it was all about ratings once again, but actually this idea had been in the vault for a while, and also we were getting rid of those plot holes again. We have to make it make sense. It also may have been a good time to pull this trigger, because again, there were some of the internet audience out there that was starting to groan about the NWO. Now, the long-established narrative is that it was super hot for 2 years, and then the refusal to change things eventually killed it. That is true, but even after a few months, those usual voices were like, I don't care for this. And also, why do they beat up the babyfaces over and over? I mean, they're just laying waste to them, and it's getting a little bit dull. They also questioned how this was an inter-promotional war, because the battle was totally one-sided, which was fair. I mean, the heels kicked ass. It's why behind the scenes, many of the WCW guys were saying, could I join the NWO, please? Because they were sick and tired of getting beaten up. December 25th, 1996, Ronny Piper is in the mix as a wrestler because, yes, he defeats Hulk Hogan at Starrcade, but this was just so nuts. Because Hulk is the world champion, but the belt isn't on the line. And why? Well, the answer is because Ronny was going to win. WCW didn't want him to have the big gold belt, though, so that is ridiculous. And it wasn't over Uncensored 1997 either, because we went Britney Spears, and we did it again, with Ronny Piper training at the Alcatraz prison in San Francisco. I don't know. And 1997's Halloween Havoc, these two guys threw hands again. But by this point, the big conversation was, this action isn't very good. I don't want to be that guy, but that is true. It is not a well thought out fight. When we get to January, WCW finally does what they have planned to do on day one, because on the 25th of that month, we get Sold Out, the first NWO themed pay-per-view. Now, the idea was always going to be a separate WCW and a separate NWO brand to try and take advantage of this whole thing. When Sold Out flopped. I mean, it did terribly on pay-per-view. I mean, the look and the feel is spot on, and it felt nothing like a World Championship Wrestling show. The balance was just off. I mean, Ted DiBiase and Eric Bischoff are on commentary, and all they do is rip and bury the babyfaces to the point where the audience felt stupid for supporting them in the first place. You also have a heel referee as Nick Patrick gets added to the group, and that just tells the audience that the bad guys are most likely going to win. I mean, this is their guy. The WCW roster also has to walk to the ring in silence too, and by this point, the New World Order were just too strong, and also they had blown up in size. It was too big. Now listen, I love IRS, or Wall Street, as he was known in WCW, but did he need to be here? The answer is likely not. What Sold Out really underlines, though, is that as cool as the NWO could be, there's no actual long-term plan. I mean, we don't seem to be headed anywhere. But the New World Order was spot on when they felt like they were threatening, which is why every single pay-per-view after Bash at the Beach did 200,000 buys or more, but Sold Out dropped to 170, because again, the audience wasn't sure what the point was. There were further issues too, as the only match that stands out here is a ladder contest, but we know the deal there. The cruiserweights, as amazing as they were never going to get properly pushed in WCW, and that feeling is soon pasted across the whole card too. Unless you don the black and white, you ain't getting shit. And do not forget that wrestling at its core is the babyface finally winning and getting their moment, but WCW made it clear at every turn, we are definitely not getting that in the near future. I mean, there wasn't one good guy who was deemed worthy to lay a finger on these guys, which is why the 20th of January is so important, because Stin starts going after so-called WCW dudes. Jeff Jarrett, Rick Steiner. The face-painted man was quite clearly saying, you doubted my loyalty, so now I'm going to whoop your butt. And he would even use his now fabled baseball bat to point at these people just to create even more intrigue. And there's even a moment where he does drop from the rafters and has a short-term alliance with Randy Savage. So yes, Sting is incredibly needed, especially when you go back to this idea of being the cool heels. Because if you were going to get the fans to support you, you needed to be cooler than them, and nobody was cooler than Sting. I mean, the anticipation for when he may swoop in becomes a reason to buy a ticket, and the sheer lack of clarity at first was great. I mean, Bobby Heenan said it best, here it comes twice. Whose side is he on? The answer was, we don't know. It soon becomes clear he has to be the individual to best Hulk Hogan once that match is good to go. And on March 16th, 1997, the decision in some ways is made. We are back at Uncensored, where to close the pay-per-view, Sting goes after Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, and Savage, who has now also joined the NWO. He finally points at Hogan, let's go right now. And amazingly, Hulk Hogan does accept, and he gets his ass kicked. This was perfect. Something must have then triggered in WCW's heads, because by July 7th, 1997, we finally had somebody else on his side, or on the WCW side, Diamond Dallas Page. Because in a now famous angle, super evil Randy Savage gets ready to face La Parka on Nitro, and of course he doesn't take that seriously. It's La Parka. Even Scott Hall, who is out with his NWO brother, goes and yells at the commentary team, meaning he's miles away from the ring, because ultimately he ain't bothered. And that's when they get got. Because La Parka is not La Parka, and is in fact DDP in disguise. And when the fans catch on to this, when he drills Savage with the diamond cutter, the reaction is absolutely brilliant, and when he unmasks, bingo, the fans erupt. I mean, the fact that it was Dallas that outsmarted these guys just meant he took all your faith in 1997, and due to that and his personality, he connects with the audience like crazy, and he's got a cool finish. He's also grafted to get there because DDP only switched to being a wrestler in his 30s, and deep down, you could respect that. Of course, he does still lose to Savage overall and is beaten down by the NWO on the 27th of October Nitro, and yes, that came after he had beaten Hogan via DQ. The finish which has been present ever since. The key, though, is that he is a rare performer who is cheered when he does indeed battle the New World Order, and that alone makes him somebody super important and why you gotta talk about him today. It's also why he wins the US title at Starrcade, because we had to give him something. It is a net positive in the sense we know that eventually it will be Sting being the guy to finish this forever, so for now we need a stopgap. The perfect stopgap is DDP. This continues on the August 4th, 1997 Nitro when our third babyface of the trio gets his moment. And by this point, that is actually Lex Luger. So we are now, of course, knee-deep in the Monday Night Wars as both WCW and WWF battle over ratings. And listen, the WCW World title has been held by Hogan since August the previous year. He's also spray-painted the belt, which meant when Luger won it on this random Monday night, well, people totally lost it. It's even more crazy because the match had only been made during the show, and look at the finish. Lex wins with his torture rack submission as Hogan submits, and Lex is just beloved. This is all down to him going full on good guy and even saying sorry to Sting. But of course, it's another ruse. A few days later, a dusty finish is used to get the belt back to Hulk Hogan, but I would still say that WCW is successful with this. 1, the monotony of the NWO was stopped. 2, before the match with Sting, fans can now start to believe that maybe Hogan can lose, so now we have the Jeopardy. 1st of September 1997, things seem to fall off the rail again, because Kevin Nash and Sean Waltman dress up as Ric Flair and Arn Anderson, and my gosh, do they go all the way. Even where prosthetics and the quote-unquote burial of the Four Horsemen is so bad, Flair and Arn Anderson are genuinely upset, mostly because nobody had clued them in. The way the crowd reacts sort of underlines that the Hills are likely too popular with them too, when on the 8th of December, it is reported the plan is still to split the brands. WCW one side, NWO on the other. Now I suppose the timing works because the WWF was very much number 2 at the time, when on the 22nd of December, we do the Takeover. The NWO is in charge of WCW Nitro. I mean, they even hang their signage over the usual logo. Eric Bischoff, Kevin Nash, and Rick Rude are also your commentary team. And thankfully, this is nowhere near as bad as Sold Out, as they are able to say somewhat nice things about the babyfaces. But still, the agenda is clear. Otherwise, Eric just gives gifts to Hogan the entire show because Hulk Hogan is great and the ending is mad. Sting and the now WCW Bret Hart also offer presents to him, and one of them is a mannequin head of the Hulkster, and Hogan reacts like he's actually been decapitated. But I guess it does still work because timing is important. This is basically the last thing we see before Starrcade 1997. The issue is, when the ratings did come in, once again the fans made their voices clear they did not want a focused NWO program. Numbers have gone down, and the long-rumoured Thursday Thunder show, which was going to be where the divide started, gets changed. I guess we'll talk about that on another video, because know this, my friends, WCW Thunder sucks. All of that does bring us to the 28th of December 1997 and the Starrcade pay-per-view. An event handled so poorly, we still talk about it today. Now, the excitement for this event is absolutely clear because it drew a buy rate of over 700,000, and that is the entire point. Starrcade was meant to be the place you got the good guy finally winning the gold, and you could go home feeling happy. The issue is, WCW forgot that. Or more to the point, Hulk Hogan did, or he just didn't care. Now, it wasn't just him, as the undercard wasn't built very well either, but some of the decisions. I mean, Bret Hart, who was undoubtedly one of the hottest free agents in the wrestling world at the time, is rushed into the promotion to be the special guest referee for Eric Bischoff versus Larry Zbyszko. All of this is sold as comedy too, apart from the stipulation, the winner gets control of the company. Thankfully, WCW wins. And then yes, the main event, it still hurts. The fact we have to talk about Sting's tan, it's ridiculous, but as the word goes, Hulk had seen the real-life Steve Borden backstage and decided, you know what, there is something not right with this guy. He is not mentally ready to be the world champion. Therefore, it's time to pull the strings. Now, most people agree that Hulk Hogan just decided that day he didn't want to lose the championship in the right way. when he did indeed exercise what we've already talked about, his creative control. It's the finish that will make you cry because it should have just been so damn easy. Scorpion Deathlock, Hulk Hogan taps out, everybody is pleased, but that doesn't happen. Instead, Hogan ensures that after he hits the leg drop, bad guy referee Nick Patrick does a fast count, forcing, bear with me, Bret Hart to return and tell Nick, I saw that, it was BS. Now that is pants anyway, but Patrick doesn't do a fast count, so fans are totally baffled. All they saw was Hogan hit the leg drop of doom and Sting just lost easy peasy. Now you can spin that story however you want, but once it is restarted and Sting does win with all the pomp and circumstance, you've already missed your moment, and it gets so bad because in later years Nick Patrick confesses to getting 2 different messages from different people. Some said yes, do a fast count, others people said don't do a fast count, so he was confused. All I'll say is that Hulk Hogan wasn't. Another factor which I'm sure WCW thought about too is that they didn't want to disband the NWO and therefore went, well, Sting can't be their death nail. And of course would require less merchandise and for once actually selling shirts, and shifting gears would have meant a total reimagining of what the company is, and they just weren't ready for that conversation. Essentially, management still feels like the old routine works when Nitro goes off the air with the NWO beating down the babyface. And sure, I suppose around this time fans were still getting into it, but what about when they weren't? It also comes down to the fact that certain members of the group just had too much power. I mean, the legendary guys on top just didn't want to give up their spots, so they didn't, and that just meant we weren't able to grow. I mean, it goes totally weird on the 23rd of February 1998, because I think the NWO forgot they were cool. You can say what you want, but Hogan, Nash and Hall still had something with this act, which is why it's so baffling when a disciple is brought into the mix. Now behind the scenes, this is all one big favour to Hulk, because yep, this is his good friend Ed Leslie, who had been Brutus the Barber Beefcake in the WWF. There was just too many bodies in the NWO by this point, it was stretched so thin, so adding the disciple to proceedings, I mean, it felt like it was the opposite of what brought us to the dance. It was also a stark contrast to what we had seen a year before, because over on Raw, Steve Austin was getting into it with Mike Tyson. So essentially, more people believe that Stone Cold Steve Austin could whip the former heavyweight champions of the world's ass than a barber being accepted into the NWO. This wasn't good. Even WCW eventually realized you can't just do the same thing forever, but as they didn't want to split up the NWO, they came up with another plan. We'll just quite literally split the deck. So on the 4th of May 98, after months of crosswords and a big falling out, the NWO Wolfpack debuts. Kevin Nash, Randy Savage and Conan of all people do this after Hogan had betrayed Nash at Spring Stampede, and much like the original New World Order, WCW gets it spot on at first, because the presentation is perfect. The hip-hop theme, the red and black, telling the audience is the good guy version of the stable. Once again, t-shirts fly off the shelves, and the 3 individuals also help, because Kevin always acted cool, nobody ever really hated the Macho Man, and as for Conan, well, he was crazy over in Mexico, they ticked the boxes. The NWO Black and White is still a thing, and being headed up by Hulk Hogan, and Scott Steiner would use this moment to become the most terrifying man in the universe. And even though you do have people like Buff Bagwell being super annoying, he is still getting booed. The issue is the disciple again. Fans just didn't want to see that. The real mistake is WCW is just leaning too heavy into all of the swerves and keeping the audience guessing so much so that Scott Hall attacks Kevin Nash at Slamboree. That didn't make a lick of sense. I mean, the Wolfpack were meant to be the cool dudes, and Hall would work much better over there, but instead we kept him over here. It all feels like this is going to be the major plan when WCW gets so lucky, because gold falls into their lap. Goldberg. Sting had won his title back at Super Bowl after being stripped of it following the Hogan nonsense, and yeah, this was so bad. The Icon should have been the champion for ages, but the way we had done him dirty at Starrcade, well, there was no way to get there. His title match against Randy Savage at Sting Stampede also had affected the buy rate, which had gone down from 400,000 to 275,000 buys. It also didn't help that WWF was super hot. So when Goldberg arrived, let's get this straight, WCW didn't have a grand plan that he was going to destroy dudes for 15 months. He just got over so fast that rightfully management decided to switch gears, and they had to. It was a rarity at the time, because the system WCW had fallen into was a horrible pattern where new guys would get cut all the time because they weren't allowed to make their way up the card. Couldn't do that with Bill, it was too over. He also popularized the spear forevermore, and the whole time he just looks like he's killing dudes. I mean, sometimes he was, as other wrestlers will tell you, but the audience didn't care. This man was explosive perfection. Short match template works too because it stood out like a sore thumb, and WCW decided to go big time. I mean, they were getting murdered in the ratings, so why shouldn't we go all out? So on July 6, 1998, in front of the fourth biggest crowd in wrestling history up to that point, we get Goldberg versus Hogan for the WCW title on free TV. Now it was totally hinged because Bill was already the US champion, and he had to beat Scott Hall early in the night to get this opportunity. It was a proper let's stack the deck against Goldberg evening. Of course, Hulk had the world championship again by this point, but as more eyes than usual are going to be watching this Nitro, he decides to do the right thing. Spear, jackhammer, 1, 2, 3. Goldberg is the man, the fans lost it. The pop really is all time and one you should check out on YouTube today, and Goldberg is also very much totally established as the main attraction of WCW and the promotion's top babyface. Finally, WCW has won, they lucked out. As ever, the creative team has to keep sending out those twists and turns though, which brings us to the 1st of June 1998. The unthinkable happens. Sting joins the NWO. Now it is way better and far better than it would have been before because it is the red and black side, and they have now been shown to be the baby faces, so if Sting does want to finally end Hulk Hogan, yeah, that would be your mission plan. I suppose the counterpoint to this is the underlying feeling of, well, what else have you got? Now you put Sting in the NWO, you're running out of ideas. Goldberg was of course different, but then it was right back to the hiring and firing of NWO members. We'd seen it a lot. Instead of blowing off the NWO versus NWO storyline, they just didn't. Instead, the respective leaders get distracted by other things, especially Hulk Hogan, because he decides he wants to fight celebrities. Now this wasn't new because Dennis Rodman had been mucking around with this back in 1997. But here it was Rodman and Hogan versus DDP and Karl Malone. And it's even said that Dennis falls asleep during this. The footage is out there, you decide. To continue this, Hogan then teamed with Eric Bischoff to face the insane duo of DDP and Jay Leno. Yes, you heard that right, and Hulk even sells for the talk show host. It also main events the Road Wild pay-per-view too. While the idea is more casual fans will be drawn to this, it does not work, and it just told the hardcore fans, you know what you used to like about WCW? Well, maybe you ain't getting that anymore. They stopped watching. Whatever it used to be called in wrestling has now totally switched to Stone Cold Steve Austin too, and rather than accept that, WCW just kept going back to the old well. 1998, Halloween Havoc. Bad, just bad. It's also around this time that WCW personnel do decide that WWF's more edgy product is what they needed, but man, they totally misjudged this. Kevin Nash versus Scott Hall is built around Scott's very real personal issues, and Kevin powerbombs Scott and then just leaves the ring and accepts the count-out loss. Don't overthink it because it is just bizarre, but WCW would tell you, well, this is more about teaching your friend a lesson than winning. No, wrestling has to be about winning, otherwise what the flub are we doing? Sadly, that wouldn't be the worst we saw because in the sub-main event, it's actually Hulk Hogan versus the now back in the fold Ultimate Warrior. Now look, this match is so bad it's hilarious, so it does have some merit in that sense, but in terms of bringing back fans that you'd already run off, that was never gonna happen. The build is totally painful too, as the Ultimate Warrior cuts promos that are so long, they totally ruin the structure of Monday Nitro, meaning segments that were planned get thrown out the window. Even the match itself wasn't interested in going right, because there is a planned fire paper spot where Hulk Hogan wants to burn the Ultimate Warrior, and instead he burns himself. The whole thing also feels entirely phony, which was the opposite of only 2 years prior, because then the NWO felt real. WCW really should have just opened their eyes at this point, because you know what the pay-per-view saving grace was? The actual main event, DDP versus Goldberg for the WCW title. Because they just have a great match, to the point if Page had defeated Bill Goldberg and been the guy to stop the streak, you probably could have pulled it off. When, even during these good times, WCW went WCW. 25% of the audience didn't see the end of this event because it went too long and the feed was cut off. WCW had forgotten to tell the pay-per-view companies, so they had to air the replay free on Nitro the next day. Oh no. Instead of rallying from this too, WCW went even more crazy. So on the January 4th, 1999 show, we got the finger poke of doom. The month prior to this, the Wrestling Observer newsletter had revealed that during a WCW meeting, DDP and Kevin Nash were added to the Booker team. Weeks after this too, Kevin Nash does indeed beat Goldberg for the title and ends his streak at Starrcade. After Scott Hall used the cattle prods, I mean, do with that information what you will. Now, the reasoning was that Bill had started to get booed, but that was massively unfair. Yes, maybe there were certain pockets that had got tired of his act, but go and watch this show right now. You wouldn't even call it mixed. The majority of people still love Goldberg. To try and profit from it, WCW did book a world title rematch for the above date on Nitro. And yeah, we were back in the Georgia Dome, so the fans were excited, but it never happens. Instead, Goldberg gets arrested, Hulk Hogan steps into the frame, and yep, he prods Kevin Nash with his finger, who throws himself to the floor, takes the pin, and not only does Hogan become the WCW champion again, but we just reunited the NWO. I mean, it's meant to provoke outrage, and it does, but good grief, was it the wrong kind? Fans had decided they'd had enough. Now, there is a certain humor to it as well, but the issue was this was meant to be the next step in the grand booking plan, and instead we were doing funny. It almost felt like we were laughing at the audience, and do not forget, in 2 years' time, WCW was going to be dead, and I would say this certainly counts towards that. So for whatever the intentions were, it didn't work at all, and the rest of 1999 sort of plods along. That's another problem. Nobody can see the end to this anymore, and we desperately needed some sort of resolution. Disco Inferno even joins in as if we needed more of that, and we have another name change. Now we have the New World Order Elite. What? The gears really stall when Scott Hall breaks his foot, Lex Luger tears his bicep, and Hogan gets injured at Spring Stampede. There may be something to that one. I think he finally knew. I mean, this was April, and by August, he was back in the red and yellow. August 16th, 1999 is where we land, though, because for 2 months, a bunch of other wrestlers continue up the guise of the NWO like it hadn't been watered down beyond repair. I mean, on one show, Stevie Ray and Horace Hogan are actually called the B-Team. Brian Adams also gets kicked out on this date, and come the 10th of September, Eric Bischoff is sacked. For real. In all of this smoke, ex-WWE head writer Vince Russo is brought in to take heed of WCW. And what does he do? He reboots the NWO, because of course he did. His idea was to base it around champions, so world champion Bret Hart, US champion Jeff Jarrett, and the Outsiders, who are the tag team champions, are stuck in at the core. Even though there is some worth to it on some level, it doesn't matter at all. WCW TV has now become totally insane. The fans also aren't interested in the New World Order anymore, even though they now wear silver. We then get to December when Scott Hall is hurt again, and there is a reason to talk about this, because the whole plan was to call them the NWO 2000. Well, Scott didn't make it to the year 2000, and of course, Bret Hart suffers that horrendous concussion that essentially ends his career. And after Goldberg has destroyed his hand, when he smashes a limo window for real, it just means this brand new version of the NWO is totally dead before it begins, and it just fades away. It also means no fan can figure out what is happening because there is no consistent thread here, and that is not the same over in WWF land. They've totally figured it out. By this point, WCW is in a state of disrepair, and they sort of do move on from the concept, but the lack of an ending hurts, and the company then dies in March 2001, because Vince McMahon and the WWF now own the IP. Given that though, he decides he can do it better. This is when he spins around in his chair in early 2002 and says the NWO is going to kill his own creation, which sounds nuts, basically saying that Hogan, Hall and Nash are such locker room snakes they'll ruin the WWE from the inside. And then turn up at the No Way Out pay-per-view and act like all is fine, before gently ribbing some of the biggest WWF superstars backstage. It didn't really feel like a threat. Now, there's certainly interest for this, but let's just call it for what it is. Once again, it does not work. Scott Hall's personal issues were still haunting him, so he wasn't on his game, and Nash is out too after a bicep injury in March. WrestleMania 18 therefore serves as the true death knell for all of this, because Hulk Hogan gets such a crazy reaction when he faces The Rock, he will not don the black and white for much longer. Given that he was always a WWE guy and is now back home, he is welcomed with open arms, and that really is the difference between the audiences. The NWO cannot work without Hulk Hogan in it, and while various other superstars do jump in, such as Shawn Michaels, McMahon kills the group dead in July, and on the 15th also says hello to Eric Bischoff, the new general manager of Raw. I mean, just think about what we could have done with that for 1 second. I suppose to end all this, we should say the group kind of returned 29 years later when the Bullet Club Elite wanted to take over wrestling. And that said, sure, the NWO really is for life. We also have to note that the NWO was so influential on professional wrestling, and their impact can still be seen today. It will forever be a pain in our tum-tums that WCW never knew how to end this, but let us end on a positive instead. They totally changed the game for forever. Now, of course, please do post all of your thoughts about the NWO below. Like the video, share the video, and subscribe. Click the video on the screen, which is another timeline video if you would like to learn more. And now, I must go lay down. I don't know how long these videos run for, but in this studio, I have been here forever. And like the NWO, it still is very sad what could have been. Goodbye.